Well, welcome to InStore's Bartender webinar. We're going to get started here. We're going to go over Bartender template design, and as well, for those of you that have BR Data back office, we're going to cover a few features in BR Data regarding label templates. Most of you have or are using Bartender for printing, and some of you are new to it. A lot of times we set up the templates for you, or some of them, on the initial installation. And there's times where you need to modify those, add new templates, and everyone seems to be interested in having further training on that. So we're going to go over mainly template designing today. What I'm going to first do is you can open up a Bartender template from the computer by going to the directory, or typically you want to do it from BR Data. If you have BR Data, this for some of you might be a little bit different logon menu, but in either case it gets you get to the same place and same menus in BR Data. I'm just going to launch Product Master and bring up an item. And from Product Master, you can hit this barcode, same with a batch file, and it will launch the label template printing. To design a label template, what you want to do is select the template and hit Design. And that's going to open up the template and let you design and modify that. If you want to create a new template, what I would suggest doing is opening up a template that has all the fields or most of the fields that you want on it, and then modifying it and coming up here and selecting File and Save As and give it a different name. There is some database setup if you were to create one from scratch. So by selecting an existing template, everything's set up. You just change the layout, change what you want to change, and then save it as a new different name. And if you're using BR Data, you have to exit out of BR Data and go back in it before that new template will show up. And I'll get back into that. What I'm going to do is start by covering up here in the top left area is the page setup of the sheet that you're setting up, whether it be labels, shelf talkers, signs. What you do is you open up the template and you can select page setup up here, and we'll start out on the far left here where it says page, and you can select whether it's portrait or landscape. And then on the layout tab, this is where you select the number of rows and columns. And as you can see, as you change that, the picture over here changes as well. So you want to decide if it's an 8 up, then it'd be 4 by 2 or whatever the layout is. And then you want to put your margins at the top, the bottom, and the left and the right. And for most signs, that's sufficient enough to have a pretty good layout when you print your signs or your tags. Sometimes by the time you get to the last one, the verbiage might be off just a little bit, but for most people, they're okay with that. If you want to get the exact printing of every single label in the exact same spot, and sometimes you have to do that when you get into smaller actual labels like 32 up and larger, or even 18 up, you can come down here and you can check this box that says Set Label Template Size Manually. So then you would put in the exact width and height of one of those, and then you can also check to set manually the gap and the pitch. That is the space between each label, the horizontal and the vertical space between each. And that way the system knows exactly to center everything exact. The Shape tab lets you set the shape of the template, if it's rectangular or round. Printing order, what this does is if you check this box, select starting position at print time, that is going to prompt you, it will show you a picture of the layout when you go to print and let you select where you want to start. And that's useful if some people peel off the backing where they want to rerun the label stock through the printer again without wasting labels. You can do that and select where you want it to start. The background tab, what that lets you do is it lets you assign a image to the background. So when you're designing this template, this isn't a good example. I'll close it and open up one that might be. We open up this 8-up as advertised. You'll see this layout with the arrows, with the arrow in the background and the yellow box up here for the savings. You can scan that image in, so when you design it, you can have a good visual of how you want to print, what you want, where you want things to print. And to do that, what you can do is you can go up to this page layout, and on the background tab, you can check this picture box, and you can say that it's an embedded picture, and then you click the file button, and then you select where you select the image you want for the background. And I do have some sort of image here. Well, this could be one. And this would be the background, and you can say to the size method if you want to stretch it, if you want the original height or original size, fit the height, fit the width. And then you can also check this box if it's pre-printed. What that will do is that will let you have a visual of the background image, but it won't print the actual image. So most sheets, label and sign stocks have the image already printed on them, so you would check pre-printed and it wouldn't print the image. If you did want to print the image, you would leave that unchecked and it would print the image and or the logo or whatever you wanted to have for a background. So that is an option if you had a color printer or even a black and white printer and you wanted to print some sort of logo or image, you can do that as well. And you hit OK, and now you can see this is on the background, so it helps you gives you a better visual to designing the shelf tag or the sign. I'm going to go back up to the 32 up. And that's pretty much it on this shelf on the page setup. Again, tells you the layout. You can print your stock, or print from portrait or landscape. Select your layout and adjust that. So on a new template, like I said, what I would do is pick a template that has all the fields on it. Come up here. If I change the layout, say I wanted to do a 2x2 or 2x1 like this, I would do that, and then you can come up here and view it and say zoom to 100%, and then you just would click on the field. Sometimes if you click in the field, it goes into an edit mode, but basically you drag the fields and then you can stretch them out to where you want. And then when you're satisfied with that, obviously you do more dragging and resizing. I would come up here, select File, and then Save As, and give it a different name, like a 2-up instead of a 32-up. You could call it a 2-up, and hit Save. And then that way, when you exit out and back in, that template will be saved. I'm going to come back up here and launch design and get into each one of these fields in the layout. So you can, when you click on a field, these are all fields in your database, which is typically linked to BR data. You can link fields to Excel files and so forth. Actually, let me step back. Up here on the page, we were at the page setup. If you go to the right of that, you have the database connection set up. And most of you won't need to mess with that. Some people that are a little more technical might be familiar with that. Or if we maybe copied in some label templates that haven't been used before or customized, the location here for the file name is the location of where BR Data creates the label out.txt. You can do a computer search and find out where it's at on your computer. But sometimes that's C BR Data, sometimes it's D, sometimes it's G. So if you ever go to print and it says it can't find the label file, you would go into the database setup and you would verify the location here with where the actual LBL out.txt file is on that computer. Or you'd call us and we can help you with that. As well, if I click that database setup, you can come up here and you can click add to add a database, and these are the different databases you can use. So you can create templates based off an Excel file and Microsoft Access file, any generic text file. And so if I was to say Excel, you pretty much hit next. You would give it the file name. Not that I have any Excel files on here, but we'll look for one. But it will pretty much allow you to set it up similar with BR Data, as you can find a Excel file and you could map out and print. Yeah, I don't have any Excel files on here. You would just hit next and go through the prompts, and you could link a template to an actual Excel file rather than BR Data. Okay, so back to the properties of each of these fields. You can select a field, and up here is the different fonts, different sizes, if you want it bold, underlined. You can also come up here and you can say edit, select all, and you could change the fonts for all of the fields at the same time. So you don't necessarily have to do each one separately. You can come up and select all of them and change the font, as well as the size. So, in addition to that, if you click on any of these one fields and right-click on the mouse and go to Properties, you can see the properties for this specific item. So, to the left here, first this tells you it's a database field, and it tells you the field name. It's the description field. If you select the drop-down, you pretty much can select all of the fields in your file, and in particularly BR Data. You can select specific ad price fields, TPR price fields, the current price field, brand, any of the fields in BR Data. You would go through here and select or change if you wanted to change it. And then the sample data here is just for sampling. When you hit close, this says long description. That's just the sample, just using the sample data that I typed in. Down in the bottom left corner here, this X has X through the database field. If you click on it, it's actually going to look at then the actual BR Data database. So sometimes people like that, so you can actually see the database and use the fields in BR Data so you can have a visual with that. The reason you sometimes might unclick it is this item, if I uncheck this, there's other fields like a warehouse code, a deposit code, ounce, and size. When you go back to and click on Connect to Database, you don't see some of those other fields because this item doesn't have those fields. So sometimes you have to flip back and forth when you're designing it, if you're designing something for everything, and then click on it so you can have a visual on what it looks like actually connected to the BR Data database. I'm going to uncheck that back so we can have a visual of all the fields. So if I right-click again back to the properties, and I can come up here to the font, and I can select the font and the size. You can also check this box if you wanted white on black, and that would do a white on black. I'll go back to properties. You can outline it. You can set a width and spacing adjustment in the style if you want to do a strikeout through it. We'll put a line through it. Different kinds of fonts. The text format. This is just a single line. You could say if it's a paragraph, or you could say if it was an arc. So it would do an arc. You can also do auto size, so it'll auto size it. If you click on the border here, you can set borders around it. You can actually set the position within that field on how you want it to fit within that field. Typically, you don't mess with the positions. And then we're back down here to the database source is the field, and right now it's currently the description. If you were wanting to create a barcode or edit this barcode, you would do the same thing. You would select properties, and this changes over here, so you can go up to symbology, and you can select the different barcode format. Different wholesalers and different scanners use different formats, so you'd want to check with your ordering, typically your ordering machine, the company, the vendor that supports that, and find out the label format, and you would put the item in that format. On the human readable over here, you can check. It's currently the visibility is set to none. If you set to full, it will put the UPC or the warehouse code directly under the item. A lot of people like to leave it at none because they want the actual UPC or warehouse code located someplace else within the template rather than directly underneath it. But if underneath it's fine, you can check full visibility and it will always print it underneath it. And then down here again under database source, this is printing the UPC. If you wanted a warehouse field, then you would go down here under warehouse item, or if it's a DSD item, you would select vendor item code, and then it would print that field from your database. And if you wanted a new field, up here you can click on this text button with a drop down. If you wanted a single line, you would simply select it and then click where you want it to drop, and then you would right click on it and go to properties. And the first thing here is embedded data just means what you type in. So whatever I type, I could say use the word per. Hit close, it's always going to print that per. I can click on it and move it over. It will always have that word on there. If I right click and go to properties and I want to connect it to the database, on the type I would click this little icon and I would change it to a database field. I would hit next, and then this is the field name. So these are your database field names. If it's BR data, then these would be all the fields in BR data. You would select brand, and for the sample data you could type in whatever you wanted. You could type in whatever brand, so you have a idea what that brand is. When you hit close, it's going to show that. If you click this again down the bottom left to connect to the database, you'll see that changes to the actual brand of the item. So that's how you would add a field. Same with a barcode. You would click on this barcode, select your different barcode formats, if it's UPC-A, which is your standard one, or your other barcode you would click it there and then do the same thing. Go to Properties. You would say typically that it's a database field, hit Next, and you would select what you wanted that barcode to be, what field you want it to be. So if it was a vendor or the warehouse item, you would hit Finish and Close, and then you could adjust that to whatever size that you want. You can stretch it. You click on the arrows for the field, or you can click on the corners and you can scale it down and then drag it to where you want. I'm going to delete that out of there. Same with this one. I'm going to delete that. And on this particular label template, there's the size field, which is 16 ounce. We have the unit price per ounce. That's if you were printing the actual price per ounce, and those are fields in BR data. This ounce here is the measure, so you'd have to be populating the measure field, as well as the system uses a unit price, or calculates a unit price based off of the total cost of the item. This might be the case pack. Then over here is the deposit field, and just so everyone's aware, if you're from Oregon, if I right-click on this, the system can, in BR data, will print a deposit. If you have a link, POS link attached to an item, which is your deposit, the system will automatically put a yes or put a CRV, the verbiage CRV or deposit in there. On this field name drop down, it's called CRV. And then there is a setting in BR data. If you're from California, you print the verbiage CRV. In BR data, there's a setting that says print the word DEP. So if you do try that and you want the verbiage to be DEP instead of CRV, let us know and we can change that. But this will print the print plus deposit or plus CRV for any item that has a POS link code. Up at the top here, in addition to barcodes and text, if you come over here to a picture, this picture drop down, you can say insert from file, and you can insert a picture on the label or shelf sign, whether it be a logo. Here I'll select this gluten-free image and I'll put it right there, and you can scale it down and move it wherever you want. Or if you want, say you might want your logo on there, you might want it to say, have whatever image you want to print on your sign, you can do that by selecting this picture button up here. Over here, if I right-click on these items and go to Properties, it is a picture, and what these three fields are used for is this particular label template is designed that this is for gluten-free, for dairy-free, I believe, and for let me look at this. Non-GMO. And I'll get back to this part real quick. So what this does is when I go to print this shelf tag, I can hit this preview button. I'm not sure if any of these items. So if I increase the size of this, you can see when it goes to print, based off of some user fields in BR data, which I'll get to later, this particular example has an organic user-defined field, a gluten-free field, and a non-GMO field. So if those boxes are checked, it will print that on this shelf tag or shelf sign. And so know that you can do that. It's a little bit, if you know how to set up some scripting that checks if that checkbox is checked to print the sign, you can do that, which I'll get to. Actually, we can go right into that. If I go to the properties on this field or any other particular field, you'll notice on the data source tab, you have this transforms tab. So this is on a picture. If I was to right click and go to properties on this item, on the data source, this is the database field, you have this transform tab. And what this transform tab does is let the bartender can do processing. When you go to print, it can do different things. It can add characters, it can strip characters out, it can limit fields, it can do some calculations, math calculations. So to do any of those things, you click on the transform tab, and I'll just go down the line here. The suppression isn't, you typically aren't going to use it. The character filter, what this does is say allowable characters all. So if you wanted to say numeric only, so if it was a field that had letters and numbers in it, you could say you wanted to strip out the letters and only allow numeric. And this checkbox warn when it fails, you probably don't want to have it prompt for that, so you would uncheck it. So that way it would strip out the letters and process it and only print the numbers. If you have that box checked, then it's going to prompt you and say, hey, there's some letters in here. And you can, under allowable characters, you can also set custom, and then you can specify certain characters that you want. So it can allow certain characters. You can also convert them to uppercase or lowercase and uncheck that validation there. Data entry control, I'll get back to that. The truncation, what this is lets you strip things from the field. So if you wanted to trim the spaces on the left or trim the spaces on the right or both, you could do that. Sometimes fields, say in BR data, might have spaces in them and you don't know about it. It's just built into the import. It brought in some spaces, so you might try to left align everything, but it's never, you can't ever get it to align. Probably because there's spaces in there, and you can check these boxes and it will trim the spaces off the ends and let you align things better. You can also discard certain characters on the left, or discard characters on the right, or keep characters on the left. If you always wanted to have 4 characters on the left, you could do that. Same with keep characters on the right, you can do that as well. Or strip .0 or 0 from a value. The number of characters, you can require a minimum number of characters. So if, say, a field had a value of 1 to a 4-digit character or value, like a PLU number, a 2-digit PLU or a 4-digit PLU, and for consistency, you always wanted it to print out 4 digits and filled with, say, a 0. This says pad on the left with a character of 0. So if it was, say it was, I've had 4 in here, and it was a 2-digit field, say 10, it would always, with this set this way, it would always have 0010 on it, so it's a 4-digit format. And you would uncheck this warn when not met. You can also limit the number of characters, so if you only wanted it if you wanted to limit it to 11 characters, or say 4 characters, you could do that. Like you wanted to limit to a 4-digit PLU code, you can strip out the rest of the codes or characters in there, and you can set it at 4 and uncheck to warn you. This search and replace, what this is used for, I'll open up a different template here, and I think it's called Produce Organic. When I hit Design, this is something that's helpful in produce science particularly. You want to have the price per pound or per each. Now in BR data, you can, if you're maintaining the measure field and you're always changing that to each or pounds, you can do that. But a lot of people have requested that they're not maintaining the measure, but they want it to print on the signs if it's by pound or each. So if I right-click on the properties of this field, the field name, there's a field in BR data called scale item, and it prints it in BR data on the label file. It's got a yes or a no. Yes if it's a scale item, no if it's not. So if I go to this transform tab and I do this search and replace, what you can do is come down here and you can click on this new action and you can give it a description of what you're doing here. And basically I'm going to say this is the weight action, and I'm going to search and replace. I've already got one called weight, so I'll call it weight too. Search and replace, so I'm going to search for a Y and I'm going to replace it with a LB. So if it's a scale item, it's going to have a Y in there, and it's going to, instead of printing a Y, it's going to print an LB. And you can see to the left there's already these two set up. So I'm going to cancel out of that. I'll go back in. So the first one says search and replace a Y, replace it with LB. Then there's an each, and if it's set, I just called it each, but it still searches. If that scale item is set to no, it's going to replace it with EA. Search and replace, you can do search and insert before, search and insert after, search and delete. You can also use wildcards, meaning an asterisk will take anything and process that action. So that's a good example of using the search and replace for that. If I go into the properties of this price field, there's a prefix and suffix. What this does is sometimes you want to have the verbiage before that field. So you might want to say per and then put a space. So then what that does is for a prefix, it will always print per $2.99 or per pound, rather than have a separate field. If I go back to the properties, I will take this out and hit OK, and it just has the price. But you can see up here we have per pound. This is just a verbiage. If I right-click on it and go to properties and click on the data source, it just says in beta data, and that just means what I typed, so it's the word per in there. And so instead of having the word per, I could have put a prefix to this pound here, and it would accomplish the same thing. What I'll do is I'm going to go up into a 4-up and hit design. And up here, a couple more formatting options. Up here, if I click on this field, I have a line left, center, right, or a single line. This is these three are for paragraphs. So if I click on a single line, it changes that format. And the difference between a single line and a paragraph is if I have a single line, it's going to print that information all on one line. So if I had a description field, I might want to print it all on one line. But if it was in front of the price field, it might run into the price. So sometimes you want to do a left-align paragraph or a center. And then what that does, when you make this field whatever size of the paragraph, it's going to wrap that around and contain it in that box. So rather than one single long line perhaps running into another field, you can set it as a paragraph and it will wrap around and turn it into a paragraph. And if you make mistakes, you can come up here and you can say undo move text. You can do edit, undo. So you can keep editing and undoing the changes that you've made. Now, I'm going to go to this sign name and go back to the properties. And under this transform tab, I skipped over earlier, there's data entry control. What this does is lets you, when you you can have fields that prompt to be overwritten when you go to print. So that's what this field is set for. And you can prompt for every field, or you can prompt one set to print when it goes to print. So if I was to go to print this or hit print preview, it's going to say enter sign name, and I can type in the sign name. Weekly special, and hit preview. So it's going to print weekly special on all the signs. So you might have one template, but you might want to call it manager special, weekly special, monthly special. You can do that with that data entry control. If I come down here to this long description and I go to properties, under this transform tab, data entry control, if I hit this wizard, I can say create, and you can create a text entry box, you can create a checkbox, a radio button, a list box, which I'll get into some other examples there. But say I do a text input box, I hit create. The field that says enter data, you can call it whatever you want. Enter long description. And hit OK. So when you go to hit this print preview, it's going to have the sign name, and it's going to say enter long description. It's going to pull from the database, because I have it connected to a database, the Merlot wine description. But I can overwrite it, so when you go to print it, it gives you a chance to overwrite the field if you want. If you don't want this field pulled, the description field pulled from the item, the sign name field didn't. So if you, again, right-click on the properties and look at the data source, if you don't want it to pull the actual field, then you wouldn't have this connected to the database. It would just say embedded data, which means what you type. If I right-click and go to the properties of this long description, you'll see it's a database field, and it's pulling from the description field. There is, when you go to do data entry fields like that, if you look down on the bottom left, there's a template. That's the template layout. The data entry form here, if I click on it, it has the layout that you just saw when you go to print it. It has the actual layout of the form. So you can click on these items and these fields, and you could move them around however you want. And so when you go to, so if I rearrange that, when I go to hit print preview, it's going to look just like that. And I will open up some examples of different types of printing by prompting. So if we look at this 4-up prompt, and I go to hit print and hit preview, it's going to pull up just a data entry wizard that says long description, price, word savings, and allow you to type in whatever you want, and it will look like that sign. But as you saw that, I'll hit print again. This layout was the layout that I moved things around and put it in the order that I wanted. If I looked at a different one, 4-up prompt entry, same information, but the layout is laid out a little different in that it's more a line item. So all I did was simply drag those fields in that order, and this is the box when you go to print, and it's not connected to any database at all. You type in the UPC, the date, the information, and it's just a form that will then print whatever I'm typing in here. If I hit preview, you'll see that. And I'll show an example of prompting here for as advertised. If I go to the properties box, Another option under data entry control when I hit create is I might want a drop down list. So each month I want to call this October special, November special, December special, or whatever it might be. I don't want, when I go to print, to have to type that every time, or some people misspell things. So you can do a drop down list and hit create, and then for the value I could say select month. And then you can say if you want to print it once at the start of the print job or for every record. Typically you do it just at the start, and you'd hit OK. Actually, if I go to property, go back into the properties, to the left here, the list items, this is the drop-down list. So I can come up here and I can say, type in October, November, and I can keep December. So when and then this is the data entry field. I can move that around and arrange it however I want. But when I click back on the template size, or the template down here in the bottom left, or the data entry form, if I wanted to move this stuff or these fields around, I could do that. And when I go to hit this print button, you're going to have this select month, and I can select whatever month and hit preview, and it's going to have that and put that information up there. So that's a little extensive on how to set up data entry control boxes or prompts for different signs and different templates. I'm going to go back in here to design, and I think we've covered the different fields and different options here. The one thing I will say is a call we get frequently on is when you go to print when I go to hit this print button, actually in VR data, when you go to hit print, you get this prompt dialog box that comes up, and I'll get back to this, but you can do this select records, and you could select a certain record, and this queried record changed to that selected record. What happens is sometimes people save the label template in that format. So by default, it's always looking to print that same selected record. So we'll get a call that'll say, hey, I'm printing this. It's not printing all the items. It's only printing certain ones. It's because it's been saved in that format. So when you go to hit print, you'll notice that it will, typically it should say all, but when that situation comes up, it's going to be set to selected. And what you need to do to fix that on a permanent basis is select that template, go into design, and come up here and say file and print, and change this queried record. It's probably set to selected. Change that to all. You don't have to hit print, just hit close, and then hit the save button. So by default, it will always save, that template will always print all records that's in the file. One other thing, if you come up here and go into file and you can go to print, you can actually up here on the document properties and the printer properties, you can go into your specific printer and you can tell it what tray you want it to, by default, that template to print from. So sometimes if you have multiple trays and you want it to always print from a different tray, you can come in here to that specific printer settings, and you can set that by default for that specific template. I think that covers everything. Oh, one last thing. When I go to properties, if I go back into this transform tab, there's this line here called VB scripting. And when you click on it, what that means is visual-based scripting. If you're technical and know Visual Basic scripting, what that does is let you set up commands to do certain things when you go to process or print. On this particular one, what it does, if I hit edit, it says, it looks at the label out flag 01, and if it's set to Y, it prints the organic picture. You can come down here and you can hit this help button, and you could get help on how to set those things up. If you say you were to create a new one, actually let me get back here. If I right clicked on the properties here and I go to VB scripting, you check the box to use it. When you hit edit, there's an example up here. You would take out the word example, but value equals value plus 1, 2, 3. It'll append 1, 2, 3 to the data source value. So I bring that up. If you know Visual Basic, you can do that prompting. If you're going to print pictures based off of conditional conditions, if it's set to yes to print this picture, then you would have to do that or call us. Another example of that would be printing spirit shelf tags. A lot of times when I go to hit print, a lot of times you want to print the tax, the liter tax, and so by setting up a Visual Basic script, when I go to hit print, it will do a calculation and it will tell you your price, the sales tax, the liter tax, and the final price. Those are all Visual Basic calculations that adjust the sales. It multiplies this field times the sales tax. It takes the liter tax and it adds it in here to the final price. But just to let you know, you can do that kind of stuff. If you wanted to do that and you needed help, you can call us and we can help do some of those things. We do, depending on the extent of it, we do charge for label template designing at times if it's extensive. We'll look at a couple other things up here. Maybe say a buy one get one free template. That's just if we look at it, someone's put in the verbiage that says buy one get one free. It doesn't pull it from anything, but that's just embedded information in there. That's just a sample of how someone might have set that up. To let you know, everyone know, in BR Data, you can set up your promotions. Down here, I have a member promotion, and if I hit the promotion button, if you don't do promotions in BR Data, you probably want to call us and make sure they're set up. But down on this line, if I hit the promotion button, this comes up, the promotion settings come up, and there's a description, and there's also a label description field in BR Data. And so what that does is lets the system, when you go to print that label, if it's a buy one get one, if it's buy 10 for 10, if it's 10% off, it lets you, when you set up the promotion, you give it a label description. So when you go to print this item on your template, I have a 4-up promo. When I go to hit print, it's going to pull that verbiage from that promotion and it's going to print it on the sign. So this 10% off Merlot, the 10% off, it pulled from that promotion label description. So that's a good way to do that and set those up. Spirits. There is gonna kind of get into some features of BR Data. There is a function in BR Data under File Setup Maintenance, whether you're using this menu or the other menu, and it's called Label Extra Text. What that does is lets you click on Add to add an extra text. And what that does is let you add a whole paragraph of information about a specific item. So in this case, it's wine, and it gives a detailed description of it. So when you go to print a label, you can print a nice detailed description of the wine, of a bakery item. So you come in here and you click on Add, and you put the UPC code in, and then you type a whole paragraph of information in there. So what happens is when I go to print that item in BR Data, I'm going to bring this item up, PLU code 653, or it could be any UPC. When I go to hit this label button, I have a shelf tag designed that is someplace here. 4-up wine extra text. So when I go to print it and preview it, you're going to see when I design the label template, it has the item description or the item, and then it puts that paragraph of information there. So you can print really nice signs for wine items, bakery items, those kind of things. If we hit design and look at the design of this item, you'll see if I right click on this field, that's just one field and it's called extra text. It's a database field and it's called extra text in BR data. And I think that covers the label template designing. I'm going to get out of here and show you a couple quick things in BR data, some functionality for label printing in BR data. If you go to export a batch out of BR data, you can select this export labels. And this box that pops up, some people don't have it enabled, but it's a setting that lets you select certain items rather than select them in other ways. You can come in here and you can say to only do add items. So if you had a whole batch of items and you only wanted to print add signs, you could click add items or TPR items, or I could use the display add descriptions only, or priority codes over here, or with a starting date of something. So it's a kind of a filter. If you don't, you can have it enabled and just hit accept through it, but it's an option there. Basically, you go up and you select your template and you can hit print. When you hit print, most of you know, you can hit this select records and it will show all the items in that batch. You can hit the red X and it'll change these quantities to 0, and then you can come in here and select different ones. You can also, and you can hit OK and then hit print. Another way to do that same thing is by hitting this sort button. And you could click on any of these headers here to sort it in that order. You can also do a multi-sort, so you can drag the fields in a certain order. Some people print by aisle and shelf location, so you could drag it in and say you want to print by the aisle, then by the shelf location. There is a field in here called batch sequence, and what that's used for is a lot of times you'll scan right here, batch sequence. A lot of times you'll scan on the gun a label batch and you want to print it in the order that you scan. So you'd sort it just in batch sequence. You could click hit sort and it's going to sort it in that batch sequence. You can also arrow over and find the field called batch sequence and sort it in that order, and click on the header and it will sort it in that order. You can also select items by holding the control key down and select the items you want here and hit select save. It's going to ask you if you want to write it back. You'll see you hit yes, it just puts those items that you selected in, and so when you go to hit print, it's only going to print those items. Well, I'm going to exit out of here and go into, when I go into export item file and labels, this is another option to print labels, especially if you're using future pricing. You would come in here and you can, over here is what you want to process. You can do it by batch, you can do it by UPC. If we select by batch here, you can do label batch. It pulls up the items in there, and some people prefer, they can just uncheck or check certain ones. They can also, again, sort it by any of these headers and hit accept. You do have to, when you're doing it this way under the export tab, you have to make sure this is set by default, export label file, which you can save it up here by default. Then you hit process and print labels. This box here is print after. It's kind of a newer box that lets you not, when you go to hit process, it's going to tell you it completed the label file, and it's going to launch the print label select box. If I don't have it checked, when I hit process, you hit OK, you have to hit print labels. So it just lets you bypass that. And then you select your template and can print that way. The benefit of doing it this way is, especially if you're using future pricing, you have this process date here. So when you go to print a shelf batch, it's always going to use today's date when you print it. If you're having future pricing, or you have multiple prices in there for dates stacked on top of each other, this allows you to select a batch that says that maybe starts next week, and if you don't change this process date, even though next week is the date of the batch, it's going to put the pricing as of this process date, which would be today. So you would want to change that, because you might want the pricing to be on the 21st, because you're printing your ad pricing ahead of time, and then you hit process and print labels. I'll go back into item maintenance and product master to show a couple more things. Under the miscellaneous tab, you have aisle and shelf location, so you can map out and print your labels by aisle and shelf location. Now, there is another field here called copies, and if you populate that, if I was to put a 2 in there whenever I go to print labels, it's always going to print 2 labels for that item. So sometimes people like that. They might have a label up at the check stand, and then in an aisle and some other location, you can populate that copies. So when you go to print shelf labels, it's always going to print however many number of copies you have set here. That is a setting that has to be enabled in BR Data, so if you try it and it doesn't work, you might have to give us a call and we'll have to enable it. If I click on these user field tabs, that's another, what that is in BR Data, it's a user-defined option that has to be enabled. And it lets you set up your own checkboxes, your own fields in BR Data. So in the case of printing organic or gluten-free, if I check organic and gluten-free, then I can print those on my shelf labels, or perhaps a picture. You can also have maybe, say, a country of origin. So for produce items, you could type in a country of origin, and it would always print that verbiage on the sign. And that's something that would need to be set up, but it's relatively easy in BR Data to set up. You can give us a call for that. So those are just some user-defined functions and uses with label sign printing. I'm going to cancel out of that, and what I'm going to do is show you an option on the handheld, which is just a simulator. When you go into the handheld for item maintenance, I can go into item maintenance. I can select, say, price mode. This is my regular batch number. I can also give it a tag batch number here. And what that does is lets me maybe do price changes, and they'll all go into batch 101. And then you'll see when I get in here, if you just hit tag, it will put the items I just hit tag into batch 900. So it lets you kind of do 2 batches at once on the gun. You're going down and you're scanning things, and you're putting your price changes in one. You might notice some bad tags that need replaced. If you hit tag, it'll put those in batch 900. Then you'll have 2 separate batches, and you'll know these items in this batch are for need replacement tags. The actual items in batch 101 are price changes. There is also, when you come in here, I can come in here, and when I hit with the setting enabled, this is a feature of BR Data, you can select a label template for each item. And so when you go to print the shelf tags, it will prompt you to insert whatever stock. You don't have to select those items and print manually. So when I hit this tag button, I can say this is an 18 up. Now when I select, I'm going to go UPC number 3, when I hit tag, I'm going to select this template. So you can go through and you can create a tag batch by template. So when I get out of here and I go to my batches, I'll take this batch 900 and I'll say export labels and click yes. But instead of selecting the template and hitting print, I'm just going to hit this template button, and it's going to prompt up here, print 18 up shelf labels. I'll put the 18 up in, and I'll hit print, or preview in this case. And once it's done printing that, it's going to launch, and now this says print 4 up, and I'll hit print, and it will then print on the 4 up. So you can do that from the handheld by some settings to enable printing by template on the handheld. There is also, in regards to label template printing, when you hit template, the system can be set up for some rules where you can assign individual templates to items, or have some sort of hierarchy on and some rules on what templates you want to assign to either a department or a vendor. If we go in here to under File Setup, you can set up a label template master, and what this does, you would typically call us to set this up, but just to give you a quick overview, is you can create an 18 up shelf template, but you can also assign label templates if it's on a TPR or an ad for automatically printing on those template signs. But you would have to set up your different shelf tags and your different template codes for when it's on a TPR or an ad. And then when you come in here there's also a label template matrix, and what this does is lets you set by a default, you can select a certain department and you can assign a template to that department. So if you're going to do template printing, you would typically set up all your departments to print on a certain shelf tag stock. And then if there's other departments that go on a different kind or a different color, you could assign a different template to those ones as well. And then you could assign, even within that hierarchy, it goes from department to category, or this category could be a vendor. There's a setting that says instead of category by vendor, and then by UPC. So yeah, they're global settings, but you can bring it all the way down to a UPC level. You also, if you come into the actual item itself, or like on the handheld when I went to print it, under miscellaneous, you can assign an actual template to that specific item. So as you saw with that handheld batch, you don't have to select the templates yourself. When you go to print a batch, you would simply say you would select your batch, say export labels, and then you would hit the template button, and that's where it would prompt you to insert the 18 up. You hit OK, then it will prompt you to put in the other stock. You hit OK, so it can manage that for you rather than you manually doing that. And if you wanted to do that, you want to give us a call, and we can talk about getting that set up. I think that covered most everything. I'm going to open up a document. This is from BR Data, actually one of their conferences, and just cover a few things that we haven't covered, just so you're aware of some other things that you can do with BR Data shelf label printing. You can print labels using movement, so you can when you go into export item file and labels, you check this box to movement only. You can put a date range in there, and it's only going to print labels for items that have movement during that date range. That helps save on wasting labels. This again we covered, where you can assign an aisle and shelf location to a specific item. You can also, on the gun, you can go into inventory menu, enter aisle and shelf location. You can put your aisle, shelf location, scan all the items, hit the plus button to increment to the next shelf, scan the next items, It'll let you use the handheld to quickly set up an aisle and shelf location database. And this is where you can actually modify it as well on the item. Or you can import it in from a spreadsheet. You can also set up maintaining multiple shelf locations. So it lets you, in addition to having a aisle and shelf location, you could have another placement or another field where at in that shelf maybe that you want a position 1, position 2, position 10. So it lets you have multiple shelf locations and how to maintain those: aisle, section, shelf, position. So just know that that's there. This label template master, this is what I just briefly went over, is to set up global parameters by department, category, vendor, and then down by UPC, where it automatically assigns templates to items. You can also have some thresholds when you go to print. It can check the aisle and location master, and then it can also, there's settings in BR data where it can look for movement. There's a movement threshold in this example, 180 days, as well as if the item is sold within so many days. So if it doesn't have movement and it was it uses the last sold date as well as the last movement date. So when you go to print it, you can have this is a label template format, and it can look at those criteria and it can strip out those items and put them on a report of sorts with a barcode. That's just a page printout that says it was last sold on this date and it was added on this date. So it can let you kind of weed out those items, or let you look at those items that haven't had movement or were added a long time ago, and you can address those. Let me open this back up here. We're just about done. Label placement thresholds. Sorting at print time, we went over that. And you can also check this box to set the sort order. So by default, it would always sort in that order. That's particularly important when you're printing by template, because you want it to sort by template. So all the items grouped into that template would be sorted together, or by aisle and shelf location as well. This is selecting a template on the handheld. And then the user-defined fields, how to set those up, and you can import those as well. You can do private label compares and savings with BR data, where you can print out comparison labels from various fashions. You can do compare and save UPCs, brands, descriptions. You can also do competitor pricing and print competitor pricing labels. And then this extra text was maintaining paragraphs of information for extra text. So that pretty much concludes everything about label printing briefly. Hopefully everyone can get something out of this, and it can be beneficial. So when you go to set up a new template, or if something's printing a little bit off, hopefully you're comfortable enough to edit that template. And a lot of times it takes editing and printing out a sample and holding it up to a real label and aligning everything up. But you should be able to create a new template and modify existing ones, as well as utilize some of these other features. So with that, that concludes this Bartender training session, and hopefully everyone got something out of it, and I thank everyone.